Okay, please, a round of applause, Eugenie Teasley.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me with the mic? Yes, no? Yeah, it's working, okay. That is what an incredible panel, and it's slightly overwhelming and intimidating to follow them. My experience is very much an everyday experience, but I hope just in about 5 minutes, I'll just give you an indication of, the title is How I Made It Work, but I think that's up for you to decide whether or not I've made it work. So, go back here. I'm a full-time working parent. I've only just joined a company that actually has benefits. I've actually had to figure it out for myself the whole way before that. My career to date has been ordinary, nothing special, just as with my parenting experiences. And even though I include on my LinkedIn profile the fact that I am a parent, and I talk about my family a lot at work and with colleagues, I have to confess, when I talk to groups of mothers, like at the school gates, about working full-time, it feels to me like going to a vegan conference and saying to people, I really love steak. Because as much as I respect vegans, and I really, really do, I can't be one myself because I really love steak. So even though I put my role as parent up on LinkedIn, I still think that this profile feels like a bit like an airbrushed photo, or when I put photos of my kids up on Instagram and I make them look all cute like this, when the reality, as we all know in here, is a lot more like that. So this is my super fast, unairbrushed version of what my life has been in the 8 years since I've both had children and still been working. Here's a glimpse into my family life in Brighton. I've got husband, Bud, 8-year-old Otis, 3-year-old Elvin, and one of our 2 dogs. But the confession is this: I didn't make that food, I didn't clean that room, I didn't dress those kids or take them to school, and I didn't walk that dog, because most days I'm going to work full-time. And when I say that, actually, when I've been thinking about this talk, I feel deeply, uncomfortably unfeminine in kind of talking about how much I love working full-time. I think that working full-time, being a full-time parent is infinitely harder than the job, which is why I go to work. And I often refer to myself as a top and tail parent, right? So I love being there at the beginning of the day, and I love being there at the end of the day, and I love not being there in the middle. I think that that's one of the reasons why, when Otis, my firstborn, was 3 months old, I set up a charity called Spark a Metal. I wanted to do something. I was like, if I'm going to go and carry on working as a parent, I want to do something that I really love that makes it worthwhile leaving the house. And the only way I was able to do that was by putting Otis in one of those door bouncers for about 35 minutes beyond the stated safe time, on repeat, every morning and every afternoon for about 3 months. He's got very strong legs as a result. And even when the charity got set up and was successful and it started doing stuff internationally and we were winning awards and all of this stuff, actually the stress and responsibility was beginning to take its toll. Because it wasn't just like having kids and having a job. It was having people who relied on me to help to get their salaries each month. And quite often grants were delayed, so I would then have the added joy of not just being a mum and working, but also having to take out payday loans in order to make sure that my team got paid on time every time a grant was delayed. So honestly, pregnancy number 2 was just a great relief and an excuse to just stop doing that for a while. The problem was, I hadn't picked a lucrative career choice, right? Setting up a charity, a non-profit, is not a great thing to do. And also my husband at that point, what a lame photo, I love it. My 3-year-old looks at this at home and he's like, Papa, that's when you were a wizard. So he was retraining to be a teacher, so I was still the primary breadwinner. And it meant that we didn't have very much money, but we were super lucky, we had a house. So we rented that house out on Airbnb the whole time when Elvin, our little one, was a newborn, which is not a relaxing way to have maternity leave every week, off in our terrible camper van and out and away. In the end, we actually decided to rent the house out for 4 months, and we moved to a cheap and affordable village in France, which sounds like idyllic and wonderful, right? And I can paint this beautiful picture. In reality, I was terrified, totally sleepless. Elvin did not sleep at all. And paranoid, because I knew that I had to carry on being the primary breadwinner when I got back, but I didn't want to have to run something of my own. It was just too much. And honestly, even on maternity leave, I don't know what is with me, but even on maternity leave, the place that I found solace and purpose wasn't in staring into my child's eyes all the time. It was actually staring back into my laptop screen and doing some more research. And that's where I found a sense of normality again. When I got back to the UK, I was really lucky and found a job setting up a philanthropic foundation for a successful entrepreneur. And that was great because I didn't have to fundraise for my own salary or for that of other people. And I was so grateful for that, and I was so excited to get back to work that I dived in, and I dived in too far. We had a tiny team, and we did a huge amount in 2 years, but it came at a price. Because every time I was overseas taking selfies with extraordinary children elsewhere, I wasn't home with my own. And I can outsource lots of things, right? I can outsource childcare and dog walking and cleaning. But the one thing that you can't outsource is marriage. Now, Bud and I have a really strong marriage. But even strong things can break if you don't tend to them for a while. And it took me about a year after getting into that role to realize that my enthusiasm for my job was at the cost of my family, and I was beginning to neglect the one man who was helping me hold things all together. So I needed to make a change, and I did. I left the land of charity and went to Uber. Now, a lot of people are quite surprised and confused when I say I left charity and went to Uber. They're like, that is a strange shift. But actually, for me, Uber is great. Why? Number one, there's stability. When there's so much else responsibility in my life, I'm so grateful to not be the boss, to not have to make all the decisions, to have a team around me. And that, for me, has been huge. Now, it is not perfect, right? There are not enough women in senior leadership roles there, but they are being proactive and thoughtful about trying to address that balance. And I organised a Bring Your Kids to Work Day in the summer. I'm one of the oldest people there, which is deeply, deeply depressing. My last job, I was the youngest by 20 years, and people had Rolodexes on their desks, and it wasn't ironic. So this has been a bit of a shift. But when I organised the Bring Your Kids to Work Day in the summer, my son Otis was older than all of my boss's children and was bossing them around all day. And I was like, get in, Otis. These days, the way that I can make it work is that I actually have more control over my schedule. And I only travel not so far as Tanzania, where I used to go, but to Southampton and Bristol and all these glamorous parts of the UK. But it means that I can get home in time for dinner, and occasionally I actually cook it these days too. In fact, the balance is getting so good that I'm beginning to think, well, maybe I should have another baby. And also seeing all these beautiful small children around here this morning is really, really difficult for me. And also, it's the first time I'm in a company that has benefits, and they're being great with mothers. And I was like, so I say to Bud, maybe we could have another baby because I can have maternity leave and it'll be paid this time. And he's like, maybe that's not the best reason to want to have another child. And actually, kind of more seriously, my mum also now has full-blown dementia. And I don't know how many of you also relate with being the sandwich generation, not just with the young children that we're caring and fighting for, but for our parents and others who are older as well. So actually, really, my attention needs to be on her, sadly, rather than on another child right now. So how do I make it work, if at all? It's, all sorts of things. I think it's more about we than I. Number one is that we're lucky to have an au pair. She's called Jenny, and she's the one who takes our kids to school and dresses them when Bud and I leave at 6:30 in the morning a lot of the times. Another thing is that I have a legitimate excuse to leave the house alone, which I love doing, during the week. It's called a job, but I don't have that on the weekends. But that's why I took up running. I'm asthmatic, I hate running, but it's my reason that feels decent to leave the house alone. And actually it's where I get solace and strength these days too. The thing that has suffered, I don't know if it's the same with you, but it's friends. These are all the friends I saw during the whole of 2018, and I had to prove it by putting them on Instagram. And then if I do want to see friends or family more than once a quarter, I have to get them to come and have lunch in my office, which is what I did with my dad just before Christmas. But the reason I really make it work is because of this guy. By the way, marrying a chef is a great life choice. And if it wasn't for all his emotional support as well as all his cooking, I just wouldn't be able to do any of what I do. I think that it's really good for our two boys, right? They're two privileged young boys to see in their family life something very different take place to what is often or considered the norm. So they see Bud, their father, doing the cooking, the cleaning, the tidying, the laundry. He loves that. He's like the male version of Marie Kondo. It's kind of weird watching her on Netflix. I'm without the bangs, that's basically you. So they see him doing that. They see me sorting out the technology and like paying all the bills. But they see both of us go out to work. They hear us both read books in the evening. And they feel us, we both wrestle them to the ground, maybe a little bit too aggressively. When I was a kid, this is such an awful photo. Anyway, I was a tomboy, and I was also an only child, and I was given unlimited choices about what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I'm really grateful for that. Now, I know that our boys are going to rebel from us in a myriad different ways, but I hope the one message that they take home with them is that even if they want to be knights when they grow up, not all girls want to be princesses, because that's one game that I say no to an awful lot. And what I really hope is when they're grown-ups and when they have their partners and when they have their lives, what feels uncomfortably unnatural to me to say about loving working full-time will feel deeply natural and part of society and just a regular norm. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.